or an example where a child turned a difficult moment into a powerful growth opportunity?
The mom had come in really beaten down, bedraggled, and wanted to show up more fully, more robustly for her kids, one of whom didn't believe in their ability to do anything physical, do anything athletic, was kind of withdrawing as a result. And so it was really, really cool to see mom get back into her sport, to feel really good about herself, and then to see her child start to try different athletic pursuits. And the confidence that this child grew in her own self and how her belief in herself manifested through all of the different things that she started to try as a result of what she was observing and talking about with her mom was really a powerful thing.
Welcome to the Foundations of Learning podcast. I hope to inspire you to actively participate in your child's learning journey, fostering a love for knowledge and nurturing the skills necessary for success in a rapidly changing world. All right, Kate, I am super excited to have you on today's podcast because we are going to be talking about resilience. And I think that resilience is like one of the most important things that we can have in our life, that our children can learn, that we can learn, because resilience literally helps you in everything. And so I want to start off by just kind of talking about what you've been doing over the years and how you got to where you are today. You have spent over 2 decades studying and teaching resilience. So how do you define resilience in the context of children and families?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. This is great. So I'm looking at resilience broadly, right? I'm not looking at it as sort of that thing that comes up when a challenge pops up and you need to move through it. Looking at it as if we as parents can develop what I refer to as a resilient lifestyle, we're going to be much more able to help our kids build a foundation in resilience from a very early point. And what that looks like is integrating a set of tools and strategies into our day-to-day, which help us to optimize our own sense of well-being and hence resilience within our own unique context. So we have to start from that place of self-awareness. What does it mean for us as parents to be at our best? What do our kids need to be at their best? And how can we build the things into our own lives that make us optimal as parents, as people? And then how can we model those things for our kids and help them to integrate in a way that makes sense for them? So it's sort of a overarching idea of a lifestyle that becomes integrated over time so that it then becomes your baseline.
I love that. There were so many important things that you said, which one of them is that it's you, right? As the parent, that you are the one that is practicing resilience in your everyday life and modeling it, because we know that kids are always watching, right? And they're going to do what they see, not really do what they're told most of the time. And so if you can build resilience within yourself, then it can, you can model that for your children. And then the other thing was that you are making this almost like a habit or just something that is shifted inside of you so that you are constantly showing that resilience and it becomes a part of you instead of something that's, because sometimes we have traits within ourselves that maybe aren't as great, right? And if we can have these positive traits like resilience, it can really, really help our kids.
100%. Yes, that's exactly right. And it becomes kind of integrated over time such that, yeah, it's always a piece of how we're showing up out in the world and what we're modeling for our kids.
I love that. So what led you to actually go into this work? Was there like a moment or experience that shaped your passion for helping parents raise resilient kids, or where did this come from?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I believe that it comes from my own early experiences as a kid. I grew up with a medical condition called hydrocephalus. I was diagnosed when I was 4. And that is a situation where the cerebral spinal fluid isn't circulating like it should. And so pressure builds up on the brain. And it was a really hard point in time, obviously, for my parents. For me, I was 4, so I didn't quite get the whole thing. But imaging technology wasn't so good back then, so it took a while to figure out what was going on. And then once that was figured out, The good news is hydrocephalus can be managed with something called a shunt, which is a little drain that's put in the ventricle of the brain that circulates the fluid for you. But bad news is shunts break. So as a kid, I was in and out of school a lot, coming back to school after surgery, looking different, feeling different, often had half a head of shaved hair and, big glasses. And I had to wear a helmet when I was ice skating with the kids, with my classmates. And helmets weren't cool back in the mid 70s, right? So it was, I think, those early experiences. In fact, I'm certain it was those early experiences that pushed me in this direction, wanting to understand people, really, be able to connect with people. I was really fortunate. My parents back then, teachers, friends, parents of friends, helped me more to focus on what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do. So I was really lucky in that, and I was able to figure out, hmm, what is my context really, and how can I do my best within this context? Not always easy. It was a process, but I know that those early experiences, you know, made me want to study psychology in school, get involved in all sorts of volunteer work and projects in high school, and really are at the core of why I chose to go down this road of psychology and working with parents, working with kids, helping them to be at their best within their own unique context, whatever that looks like for them.
I think that's amazing. And I think, that we can all kind of do that in life, right? We can take something that's, maybe a hardship within our life, and then we can use that for good to help others, right? Because throughout your schooling and everything, you definitely kind of had the school of hard knocks in resilience, right? And having to work through all of that was going on in your life, and helping others to now have that resilience that you had to build and learn throughout your life. And I'm glad that you had educators and friends and people in your life that were telling you what you can do, and that you are capable, and that you don't have to allow this to really like shape your life in like a bad way, right? Like you can persevere through it. And I think that's so important. And I wish that every child had that experience, right? I've had multiple kids in my classroom that have, different learning disabilities or autism or any, of the above, right? That makes it harder for them to, not harder for them to succeed, but they have to have different supports in their life to help them to succeed, right? And just having a person in their corner that believes in them, that understands that, like, hey, yeah, you might have XYZ, whatever, but that doesn't have to shape you. It can, but like we can shape ourselves to succeed as well. Does that make sense? Like, we don't have to be that label. We can persevere through it, and having somebody to believe that they can actually do that.
Yeah, 100%, right? And so, yes, that was so important for me to know early on that, yeah, so I happen to have this condition, made certain things harder, but I wasn't going to define myself based on that condition. I wasn't going to allow it to hold me back in the big picture. Sure, there were moments where, I was recovering from surgery, I couldn't do certain things. There were moments in the classroom that were very difficult, very challenging. But there was always that possibility on the other side of the challenge. And there was always that message that I got really early on, that it was important not to define myself based on this, and that there was more possible. And sure, I didn't, I might not have, had the same grades as my best friend, or, there was a point when math became very challenging, and it's okay. So I wasn't that great at math. So what was I good at, and it happened to be writing. It happened to be things in English, and then, gravitating towards the behavioral sciences and all of that. And I learned to circumvent the challenges with strengths. And I think that's a really important message to share with kids, particularly when they're struggling in the classroom, or there's something that makes them stand out as different. And instead of allowing that thing that makes them stand out as different to define them and hold them back, it's rather it can be a catalyst for helping them to move forward in a direction that allows them to flourish.
100%. And I do think, that within our school system today, we do try to put everybody in this like little box, and like everyone has to, be similar in this way. Everyone has to be experts in everything, but that's just not how life really is. That's not what being a human is, right? Everybody has their own strengths, their own weaknesses. And yes, we can always try to be better in our weaknesses, but we also need to lean into our strengths, lean into our passions. And I mean, I was the same as you. I struggled in math so hard throughout my entire schooling career. That's just like not my language. Math is not my language. It's my husband's language. He is fantastic with math, but I'm the same with you. Like I definitely soared in writing and in reading and really just connecting with other people. And I love psychology as well. Like I always joke that if I was to go back and get another master's, I already have a master's in education, I would probably do something in like psychology. Like it's just very intriguing to me, and people and connecting and all of that is something that I thrive in, right? I don't really thrive in math, and that's okay. I mean, I'm okay at it, but I don't thrive in it. And so I think helping kids to understand that, like you said, that we have superpowers of our own, and kind of going into this too, I had a student one time that they were diagnosed with ADHD, and there were times where he wouldn't get his meds, and he would basically use that as like, I can't do XYZ because I didn't get my meds. And it's like, listen, I understand that maybe that helps you to focus, but that doesn't mean we can't focus. It might be a little harder for you at this moment in time, but you can still do it. Let's, do XYZ to help you to focus since you didn't get your meds, but it's not something that's like an excuse to not persevere through something, to not focus, to not work hard, and that you can do this. And so I do think early on, even with really young kids, they start to define themselves with whatever labels we put on them. And they almost, not that they learn helplessness, but they can based on the narratives that they hear from the adults and the other kids around them.
100%. Yes. And it's okay to help our kids. Well, it's important to help our kids know and understand that at certain points, certain things are going to be harder than at other points, right? So the example of young boy didn't get his meds doesn't mean you can't do it. Doesn't mean you're shut down. Might mean it might be a little harder to focus or move forward on X, Y, or Z going on in the classroom, but still important to push forward and do your very best within your context on that day. And that day, the context is no meds, and it's okay.
Yeah, 100%. So I know, just working with parents and working with kids, we kind of have this perfectionism that is kind of just rooted within us. I don't know if it's something that's innate or something learned, but many parents do feel overwhelmed by the pressure to get everything right. Kids kind of feel the same thing within the classroom, like I have to, get the good grades, get 100%. And so what does resilient parenting look like in real life with all of the messy moments and everything that, happens within life?
Yeah, that's such a great question because it's real, right? There are messy moments and things get hard. And so, it starts with our ability to manage our stress response and show up level each day, as opposed to showing up here, such that when a challenge hits or we think something has to be perfect, we're going to stress, we're going to escalate to the point of shutdown, perhaps. And that's not great. So having a way to show up level as possible each day, keeping in mind there'll be, stressors that come up, and riding them like a wave is important. But beyond that, it's understanding that perfection doesn't exist. And there's no one size fits all in our parenting, and no one size fits all in how we're going to approach challenges that come up. And so it's figuring out what's going to work best for us and what's going to work best for our kids. And it's important for us as parents, as resilient parents, to communicate to our kids that perfectionism and perfection doesn't exist, right? Perfectionism exists, but perfection does not. And It's a question of doing our best within our own unique context and not being afraid to shift gears, try something from another angle if it doesn't work out the first time, or if we didn't show up in our parenting, in a parenting moment as we would have liked. We can hit the rewind button. We can be honest with our kids and say, hey, you know, that wasn't my best. I didn't show up the way I wanted to. Maybe I reacted instead of responded to something you said to me or what have you, or a grade that you brought home. I didn't really mean that. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out what was going on. And as long as you were doing your best on that test, you gave your best on that day. So you got to be, so you got to see, it's okay. There's always space to recover from that place. And I think it's also really important for us as parents. Part of this equation is not being able to, and not being afraid to share with our kids in a developmentally appropriate way the points where we struggled, the challenges that we had, the times that we didn't get that grade that we wanted on the test, or our project didn't go like we wanted it to go. And that there are ways to come back from that. And the important piece is coming back from it, trying again, doing your very best. And that's really all we can ask. But circling back, no one size fits all. And there is no such thing as perfection.
Did you know that over 60% of U.S. students fall below grade level in reading, and it often starts in the grades kindergarten through second grade? Don't let your child become a statistic. My Science of Reading Simplified course gives you a step-by-step tool to teach phonics, vocabulary, writing, and reading comprehension. If you want to equip your child to succeed, start today. Visit k3homeschoolfoundations.com or check out the link down below to get started. Yeah, I think that's important for all of us to learn. I know I'm a perfectionist. I know that about myself. And I'm really, really, really hard on myself. I think most people are pretty hard on themselves, and they critique. You're like your worst critic. That's like the saying for a reason, because you are constantly trying to be better. And then sometimes you can be hard on yourself when you're not at your best, or you're not at your best. But what is beautiful is that I think that any minute in any day is a chance to start over, to like, okay, that was not a good moment. Let's start over. And it's hard to learn that for sure. And then I think just having the know-with-all to apologize if you didn't handle a situation great. And it really teaches your kids too that, like, yeah, they're going to have moments in their life where they might have a reaction. And sometimes we have to work through that emotion and let the emotion out. And then we can kind of back up and say, okay, that probably wasn't the best way. Like you said, I was reacting, not responding, to actually handle the situation. And, talking to your children about that. And that helps them to then say, okay, I can do the same thing, even if I had, a meltdown, or I hit my brother instead of asking him nicely not to take my things, or whatever it was, right? They can stop and say, okay, that happened. I'm going to go to brother. I'm going to apologize. And then we can talk about what I would do next time, right? And we can kind of have different things that we can do to help our kids through those things. But you modeling that to them when you do mess up, because you will mess up. And that's one thing that I am learning as a new mom too, is just like, you mess up sometimes and you have to just forgive yourself and let go of it, and then move on and apologize, or whatever it is, right, that you did wrong, and show them what you can do instead.
100%. Yes. And it really is that ability to put it out there. That wasn't my best. I wish I had shown up for that differently, or done that differently. And that, is such an important message to give our kids from the get-go, because we don't want them to see us as these perfect, infallible beings, because then if they do, they're going to have a harder time, coming forth when they make a mistake, or when they wish they had showed up differently or done something differently. So yeah, super important thing for us to be able to model and do with our kids.
Yeah. And I mean, as an educator, that was one thing I had to work on a lot, was, because there are times in the classroom where there's so much, and you have to be the person that's constantly that like level head, that, guide, and the person that's literally regulating everyone. I mean, I taught first grade, so it was They don't have lots of self-regulation yet at that point in
Right.
time. And so I had to be the regulation for 20 plus kids every single day. And being that regulation can be really, really hard at times. And there were times where I was like, everyone just stop, like, ah, and then I was like, okay, I'm sorry. That was me. I got to a point that was like overstimulated, too much noise, too much going on. And I should have recognized that and I would tell my kids that, like, I needed to recognize in myself, okay, it's time that maybe Mrs. Flint needs a break for a second. And
Yeah.
like, let's do a go noodle or let's do some yoga or breath work for Mrs. Flint so that they can see that, like, okay, yeah, my teacher, does the same thing, because that happens with kids, right? They're practicing that self-regulation. They're practicing how to handle situations and problem solve and all of those good things. And if you can show it as a teacher, then they can start to recognize in themselves, oh, I'm feeling that prickly, like, feeling, and I need to walk away from the situation, or I need to do some breathing, or I need to do whatever. And so it's helpful for them to see that. And I noticed that in my students, as I was over the years getting better at this and showing them, like, when I would just walk them through it, talk them through it, right? I would just model it and talk about it. And then I started noticing that my students started to do that. And they would, say, like, stop, I need a minute or something. Like, they knew, like, okay, I'm going to explode. I need a second. And then they would come back, and they were getting really good at apologizing to their friends, not because I made them apologize, but because they recognized that Mrs. Flint apologizes when she was maybe, not as level-headed as she should have been, or she apologized when she didn't handle something correctly, and now I can do the same. And so I started noticing that it wasn't like this thing where I had to be like, sit down, apologize to them. You did, what can we do different? Like, they started to want to do it on their own because of the modeling that I was providing to them.
100%. Absolutely. And so much space for all of these things to play out in the classroom. So I love it. And it sounds like you were, doing everything in there. And that was a lucky group of first graders. How long did you teach first grade?
I taught first grade for 4 years.
Awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
a lucky group of four concurrent groups of first graders. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. I definitely wasn't good at that in my first few years. It was like my last two before I decided to leave and start a family and all of that stuff. That was like really where I started learning that. And it was the learning that, like, power struggles is harder than really, because it's like, I feel like when you first jump in, you don't know what you're doing as an educator. I think that's probably every profession everywhere, is that you go to college, you learn all this stuff, and then you actually have to apply it. And then it's really hard and you're trying to figure it out and whatever. And I think you go in as an educator based on what you've learned is like, you get a lot of power struggles with the strategies that they teach you to manage a classroom. And what you really need to do is back up and be like, okay, we're all humans trying to, that have a common goal, and we're trying to get to this finish line, and we all have to work together, and we're all a community, and understanding the child as a whole human instead of like somebody that you're trying to have a power struggle with is super, super important. And it's really funny because, like, I would have my principal tell me, he's like, your classroom management is so great. Like, what are you doing? Like, do you have this chart? Do you have this sticker chart? Like, what are the things in place? And I was like, honestly, we talk it out, we problem solve. I try to have a relationship with all of my students, treat them as a whole human. They understand the rules that we have and why we have them so that it makes sense. And it's not just like, because I said so. And so really just like talking, taking breaks when we need to. I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to create a community that we can all work together because we all have a common goal. And obviously I know there's like research out on that and everything about building a community and relationship with your students is like the number one thing if you want to have a classroom that isn't chaotic. But yeah, it took me a long time. Well, not a long time, but a few years to really figure that out.
I love that. Yeah. And what you say about connecting with your students as human beings in that authentic human way, with a holistic kind of view of them is so vital. So yeah, it's no surprise that you had great classroom management, because that's awesome. That's the foundation that we want to build as parents, and we want to build as educators, and the whole thing. So I love that.
Yeah, I learned a lot being an educator, and I hope to implement that as well in my own family, right? Because again, it's like, it's just a smaller version of what your classroom is. You have that community. We all have a common goal. We're all, trying to become the best humans that we can become. And you're also doing that in the family unit. It's just a way smaller, more intimate version of that, right? And so I definitely have taken some things that I'm like, okay, this is what and obviously it's not a one size fits all. And I know that as well, because as an educator, every single year you have a new group of kids, and it doesn't matter if you thought you had it figured out. The next year is going to be completely different. You have different personalities that are all in that community that you have to now figure out. And the same goes for the family, right? Not every kid is going to be the same. You're going to have to parent every child very differently, and you're going to have to, and that's a part of being resilient as a parent, right? Is you have to have that resilience to be able to say, okay, that doesn't work with this kid. I have to change my approach and do it differently with this kid.
100%. Yes. And I have 18-year-old twin boys and very different kids. And, people want to think like, oh, well, they're twins. They're the same. And and no, not so much. Wonderful boys. Each of them are wonderful. But they each have their own unique contexts that we've had to help them flourish in over time. One of them extremely academic from the get-go. The other one really struggled academically early on. And so is figuring out how to help him flourish academically in a way that made sense for him. It wasn't going to match his brother's high academic achievement, and that's okay. It's okay. Well, what are his strengths? How are we going to help him to navigate some of those academic challenges, particularly early? And how are we going to help him be his best academically, whatever that's going to look like over time? And I'll tell you, we were able to take that approach, and it wasn't always easy, and didn't always seem like a clear path because it wasn't. It's not linear. It's one step forward, two steps back, a little bit more circular. But he's 18 now, and he's flourishing in his own context, and his brother is too, in a different way. And that's just a part of it. And so they're twins, but that same kind of lens is going to be helpful for siblings. Siblings in the same family are most likely going to be very, very different.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you have the same parents, and they might even, parent you somewhat similar, but somehow we all end up different. We all have our own different personalities. Like, it's really funny. I have 3 siblings, and when I look at all 3 of us, like, we are all very different. We've all taken, somewhat different routes in, what we're doing in life. And it's just kind of funny that we had the same parents, but it's, you end up in different places. You have different strengths. And like my sister, she's an accountant. Okay. She is a math whiz, not me. Like, if you ask me to do accounting, please know I'll probably get audited by the IRS because I'll do something wrong. I don't know. But my sister, she's really good with that. Right. My other sister, she's a dental hygienist. I would literally puke if I had to look into people's mouths. Like, that is so disgusting. And then here I am, an educator. Right. And then my brother, he, does a lot of stuff with his hands. Like, he was an HVAC. Now he works on base. Like we're all just like very different in what our strengths are, right? And yes. So I think it's so important. You have to support your children in different ways. And, some children might be more logical, some might be more emotional. And so it's so important that you recognize that and then help them through that. But I do want to talk about, because we are kind of talking about, weaknesses here, things that might cause breakdowns or even breakthroughs. And so when you're helping families with these breakdowns and breakthroughs with their kids, what does that process actually look like for a child that might be struggling with self-confidence or something that they're, maybe they're wanting to be better in soccer or school or whatever it is? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so it really is, again, not a one size fits all, but it's a question of the parents or the coach or the educator connecting with the child in that authentic human way and understanding what their experience is of whatever it is going on. Is it a challenge in the classroom? Is it a challenge at home? Is it a challenge on the sports field? Did they have a hard game, or do they want to, get better as a goalie or what have you? And it's figuring out, what is that experience like? How is it impacting them kind of not being in the place that they want to be? And then figuring out, okay, well, what are some steps that we can help you integrate to get there? And obviously this is developmentally contingent, wherever the kid is, developmentally is going to depend on exactly the steps or strategies. But the thing that's most important is to help our kids, just as we need to show up with that level stress response. We want to help our kids to do the same. We want to help them to, start the day here, start the challenging moment here, as opposed to up here, so that when the challenge really escalates, they're going to shut down and not be able to do much of anything. So I like this technique that we can integrate ourselves as parents, but also teach our kids. It's called the relaxation response. It was a technique developed by a physician in Boston back in the 1970s. Super easy, but super effective technique. And what I help people do is come up with a word or a phrase that they find soothing in some way, and they just breathe. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes later in the day. And as they're doing that, practicing consistently over time, that level baseline becomes more integrated. It becomes just part of the day-to-day. They can also carry that around in their back pockets. I have kids all the time who pull this technique out and use it before a stressful test, or a game that they're really anxious about, or the game hasn't gone well last weekend and they're afraid they're going to make the same mistake. They practice this technique, they level themselves out. Super helpful. So that's the first thing that's kind of universal. Then, you want to have understood the experience. Then we want to have kids practicing wherever the challenge is, at the end of the day, coming up with 3 to 5 things that went well on that day, either globally, across the whole day, or relative to the domain where the challenge might be, in the classroom, on the sports field, or some other place with friends or whatever. Helping them to pick out those 3 to 5 things that did go well really helps to neutralize that lens. Because when we're just focused on the challenge, obviously we have to contend with the challenge, but if we're just focused in that place, it's going to be hard to move forward. It's going to be hard to try something from another angle, which is the thing that's going to help us build the confidence. So that's called the daily wins exercise, really important. Then I often have parents help kids, or I help them myself, with visualization exercises. What does it look like out on the soccer field to be at your best in the goal? What do you hope is going to happen? What does it feel like? What does it look like to be just in that classroom and just motoring through that test? Like, you know what you're talking about. How can you get it out there on the paper? What does that look and feel like? So helping kids to come up with a quiet space each day where they can actually visualize some of these things to help them perform or show up in the way that they want to be at their best, really helps them to actually experience what it's like to be at their best, then be at their best in the situation. And all those moments add up over time to build confidence. So that's kind of an overview of what the process might look like across different domains.
Parents, have you ever wondered what your kids are really learning about important topics like taxes, freedom, and responsibility? As an educator, I once had to teach a social studies lesson that only focused on the positives of taxes, completely ignoring the downsides of over-taxation or the importance of personal responsibility. It made me realize how limited the perspective is in many traditional curricula. That's why I'm so passionate about the Tuttle Twins books. These books teach kids both sides of important issues like economics, freedom, and entrepreneurship in a way that's fun, engaging, and easy to understand. They help children think critically and understand the world in a more balanced way. If you're ready to check it out, use my link down below to explore their incredible resources, give your kids the tools to think for themselves, and support my podcast. I love that because I feel like they kind of build onto each other, right? You have like something so simple, which is like a word or a phrase or something with breath, right? That you're practicing, and you can do that at any time during the day. Super simple. No one even has to know you're doing it. You're just breathing, right? And then you have the second thing, which is, and that can bring us down from like if we're on the ledge, right? And we need to come down from something. It can help us to regulate ourselves. And then you have, the what did you call that? The grateful, or like what you're grateful for. I can't remember what you called it now.
Oh,
That term.
the
Or not grateful for, but sorry, the things that you accomplished or what
yeah,
you
the
were
things
good
that
at.
went well on a given day.
Yeah, it went well.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking like gratitude because it's almost kind of like a
Yeah,
gratitude
it
journal
kind of
type
is. It's
situation, sort of.
like the daily wins exercise. So the
Yes.
wins, the things that went well. Yeah,
Yes, but it's like a win for whatever that
yeah.
is that you're having a challenge in, right? And I think that's so
Mm-hmm.
important because, I mean, even as adults, we often will, maybe not do as well in something that we wanted to do on, but we did do something good within that, right? Like I'm just even thinking like a reading lesson or something like that. Like if you have a child that maybe they're really, really good at, I don't know, phonemic awareness, which is literally just manipulating and hearing sounds and words, right? Maybe they're really good at that, but they were struggling to remember some letters that they maybe thought they had mastered and they were struggling with it. And now that's all they can focus on, right? That's the only thing they can focus on is that I forgot what the letter X said. And oh my gosh, I'm so terrible. I'm never going to learn to read, right? Like it's a spiral thing that they do. But if you can show them what they did well in and they can actually think about what did I do well in that reading lesson, right? I did X, Y, and Z well, and I still need to work on that letter. And that's okay. We'll work on it and we're going to master it at some point, right? Yes. And really just kind of looking at it in that way, it kind of builds upon each other that they can use certain strategies to help them see what they did well at. Because when you're working on something challenging, it's going to be hard, and that's okay. There are hard things in life, and we have things that we might have done well, like you said. And then visualizing is so, so important. I did drill team when I was in high school, and she would make us visualize what a perfect routine would look like. And she would literally play the music for us. We all just laid on the floor. We didn't even do the dance routine. We just laid on the floor, closed our eyes. She made us like do a steady deep breath in and out. And then she would start the music, and you had to literally see yourself doing the routine as the team perfectly. And then once we did that, we would do the routine, and then we would stop and we would lay on the ground again. Like she made us do that throughout practices. And I'm thinking, as like a 16-year-old girl, I'm like, this is weird, but okay. But hey, we ended up like doing very well in our competitions. And I felt like as a team, like collectively, we were better because of it. And then she even did that, like, what were the, kind of what you're talking about. Like, I'm like thinking back, I'm like, wow, my drill coach was amazing as far as like helping us through this stuff, because she would, like, if we didn't get the place we were hoping for on a certain dance routine, she'd be like, all right, what did we do well? Let's talk about what we did well. And then what is something we can fix to be better. Like, let's look at what the judges said and let's see, okay, this is what we did really, really good in. That's great. This is what we didn't do great in. This is what we need to practice. And then just seeing like, okay, we don't just suck. We actually do have some good qualities, and this is what we can work on, really helps you to not feel so down when you don't accomplish what you wanted.
100%, right? So seeing those things that did go well, even if they were really small, in the bigger picture, so helpful in helping us to get back up and move towards something from maybe a slightly different place. But it's that belief that it's possible to master that dance, or master the phonetic awareness, or master the letter, or whatever it might be. Really, really key to be able to see those small bits of what went well.
100%. So when we're talking about struggle, it is really, really hard to see a child struggle. And now, as being a mom, it is a million times harder to watch your own child struggle. Like, it's just so different than watching. Like, I was really good with, my students and like letting them get to that point of productive struggle, but not over rescuing or over controlling what they were doing, and just kind of trying to help them through it. But now as a mom, when I see my daughter struggling, like it is so, so hard for me to not rescue her or, try to over control something. My husband's a lot better better at it. He is a lot better at allowing her to just kind of struggle through it. And I'm like, save her, help her, And so, knowing that as a parent, how do parents balance supporting their child, but allowing for the space for them to struggle without rescuing or over controlling when it's not actually needed?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And you're right. It's so hard, right? It's much easier in the role of a teacher or, a coach or something along those lines. When it's our own child, it becomes much, much harder. But still important to create that space for your child to, in a developmentally appropriate way, in a way that fits who they are, grapple a little bit to try to learn those vital problem solving skills and all of it. But it comes down to, at first and foremost, knowing your child and knowing where the line is, knowing where that space of, okay, this is going to be productive struggle or productive working through a challenge. But where's that line where maybe it becomes unproductive? Maybe it becomes more of a hindrance. So always having that scaffold in place, that lens on, okay, where's that line where we don't want our child to have to push through that is important. And also, really keeping an eye on ourselves, knowing ourselves well enough to know what we need to be able to take that step back, to watch a little bit from a distance, and know where that line is. So it's self-awareness for us as parents, what we need, as well as what do our kids need. So the awareness of that and the ability to bridge that gap when necessary, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, yeah, it's something that you're really going to have to work at as a parent that I've realized. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. Like, and I'm a new mom, so I'm really just still learning my daughter's personality, and it changes all the time. And every single day, I swear she's a different human.
Yeah.
And so really just, working, because you have to adapt as a parent as well. Like, you think one thing worked, at one point, and now that doesn't work. And like, your child is becoming their own human. But I do think it's important to know your child and know what their breaking point is, because you don't want to get them to a point where they're just like fed up and frustrated that they're not accomplishing anything now, right? It's a fine line. And so, yeah, I think it's important to know that in yourself, to know that in your child. Can you, or do you have a story or an example for yourself or for a family where a child turned a difficult moment into a powerful growth opportunity using your methods?
Well, I do, in that, I've got a bunch of different stories, and I could go back to my childhood, but I'll kind of keep it within the context of a client and how I worked with her to help her child to believe more in themselves and their own abilities, and actually help the mom do the same. Um, the mom had come in really beaten down, bedraggled, had wanted to get back to um, a high level of competition in a sport that she had once participated in, was finding that really, really hard. Um, was also presenting with this idea that wanted to show up more fully, more robustly for her kids, one of whom didn't believe in their ability to do anything physical, do anything athletic, was really feeling beaten down and was kind of withdrawing as a result. So helping the mom over time get back to her sport helped her to model, because it wasn't easy, helped her to model that resilience, that ability to try something, then try something again from a different angle, and then find the right fit for herself so that she could get to that place that she wanted to be. Was able to model these things through example, how she was living her life, how she was living moment to moment, as well as through discussion, because the child was developmentally able to engage in and understand kind of what was happening through discussion, through connection on that level. because sometimes it's just modeling, right? And kids kind of watch. But as kids get older, they're able to engage in that discussion in that more of an abstract way. And so it was really, really cool to see mom get back into her sport, to feel really good about herself, and then to see her child start to try different athletic pursuits, start to, dabble with, oh, well, maybe I should try out for the, basketball team. Maybe I should think about what would it feel like to start trying to learn to swim? What would that be like? And the confidence that this child kind of grew in her own self, and how her belief in herself manifested through all of the different things that she started to try as a result of what she was observing and talking about with her mom was really a powerful thing.
I know I'm not the only mom who wants to be present with her kids, but sometimes I have no idea what to actually do with them. Once my daughter becomes a toddler, I already know I'll want more than just screen-free time. I'll want connection, learning, and purposeful play. But coming up with those ideas on my own every day, that sounds exhausting. That's why I love what Learning with Kelsey offers. These boxes are full of hands-on, play-based activities designed to help you connect, teach, and enjoy your child, all without prep. Whether it's fine motor skills, letters, numbers, or sensory play, there's something for every age and stage. So if you're like me, wanting to make learning meaningful at home, use my link and get 15% off your first box. You can be the teacher, guide, and safe place for your child's needs, and it doesn't have to be complicated. I love that. And I think it is important that as parents, I think we're trying to give everything to our kids. Like, we're giving it all, right? And we almost, especially I feel like as moms, like we kind of forget that we were a human before we became a mom, before we had kids, right? And we had hobbies and we had interests and passions and all kinds of things. And that it's okay to, and not only okay, but important for our kids to see us pursue something that is our passion, or to, try something new, or to just continue, also showing up for ourselves. Because I think that it does, like you said, it models for your kids that, like, oh, like I can try hard things. I saw my mom or my dad do, something really hard, and maybe they failed. And how did they handle that failure? And then what did they do to, get better at said thing or whatever. And so I think it's so important that we do that as parents, because it can be really easy to kind of forget what your passions are or what you want to be doing as well. Like, we don't give enough time for ourselves, and we need to be doing that, because it's super important to model that for our kids.
100%. Yes. And this is what really became so clear in the example that I gave, because, yeah, absolutely. And we're not only engaging in things that are meaningful to us, passions, hobbies, which is a big piece that I work with folks on, because that can get lost as we're, focusing on our parenting journey, and we're focusing on giving everything to our kids or those around us, our family. So important to engage in those things that bring us meaning, make us feel whole, because otherwise, can lead to burnout and other things. But so powerful in terms of what that models for our kids, giving them confidence to try new things, to engage in passions and hobbies in a meaningful way. And so really helps both us as parents as well as our kids to flourish and be at our best.
I love that. In everyday life, we kind of like to compare ourselves to others. We like to compete. Those are just things that are going to show up naturally in life, whether that be just day to day, academics, sports, competition and comparison between siblings. Just, it's always going to happen. So because of that pressure that some kids may feel, how can parents help children to navigate that competition and comparison in a healthy way?
Yeah, it's so important. And so helping our kids to understand their context, just as it's important for us to understand understand our context, and recognize that, some things might be hard. What are our strengths, and how can we circumvent the things that are hard within the context of not comparing ourselves to others, not believing that we've got to be, getting all A's, or we've got to win all the tennis tournaments like our best friend does. Maybe we have different strengths, where we're going to excel beyond whatever it is. But really to appreciate, as long as we're giving our best, bringing our best, that's all we can ask of ourselves, right? That's all we can ask of our kids. And we want to really give them that idea that flourishing within your own unique context is enough. And comparing ourselves to others can really be a detriment, because it's going to make us feel, it's going to make our kids feel like it's never good enough, like we're never showing up fully enough. And that's not true. You know, everybody is bringing different strengths, different passions, different things to the table. And we're not all going to achieve at the same level. We're not always going to, get the same result. And that's okay, as long as we're bringing our best. And I think that's the most important message that we can give our kids in that way.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think as we're talking and we're talking about all of these different things is your mindset yourself has to be so like you have to that has to be your mindset for yourself is what I'm trying to get at. Like our mindset and our self-talk is so important to model for our children what that's going to look like and sound like, because if you aren't embodying the things that we're talking about right now, it's going to be really, really hard to teach your child that one and to model it, obviously, kind of like what we started this conversation out with, right? Like our mindset and our self-talk is so important. And so if you, I think as an adult, like if you're struggling with these things, like you need to work on those yourself first before you can even help your child through those things.
100%. Yes. And that's, at the core of resilient parenting is understanding yourself and understanding what you need to optimize your well-being, your own sense of self within your own unique context. That's what's so important.
That's awesome. So, because I know that this is going to happen at some point, no matter how great you are at doing all the things that you're talking about, there is going to be a point in time where a child or there's like a child's stress to school or a sport or learning a musical instrument or whatever turns into something that's deeper, more like a burnout, perfectionism, anxiety. Like it's just so overwhelming for them. What are some of those early signs that you can notice as a parent? And then what can you do to try to mitigate that?
Right. Yeah. There are going to be those points where things kind of get pushed over the line to maybe something a bit more clinical, or the kid is, bogged down to a degree that it really is worrisome and not something that you can mm, address fully in the ways that we've talked about. So those are the points where, we really want to get a professional involved. We want to talk to the child's pediatrician. We want to consider a therapist, short term or maybe longer term. We want to really look at getting support beyond what we can offer. And sometimes that just is very necessary. And that's okay. It's important.
Do you have any like early warning signs that a child might be getting there? Like if they're getting too stressed out, burnt out, and there's something deeper going on, like are there signs that you would look for?
Yeah, so I would say, it's withdrawal, it's losing interest in activities that were really making them happy or bringing a sense of joy. It's not wanting to hang out with friends. It's maybe sleeping more, sleeping less, eating less, just things like that to keep a really keen eye out for.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk a little bit about just some quick practical strategies for everyday life. I know we kind of talked about that with like our breathing and our 3 wins for the day and things like that. But what are some daily practices that families can do together or use to strengthen that resilience at home?
Yeah, so again, practicing together or independently that relaxation response that we talked about earlier. Um, Making time for authentic human connection, whether it's around the dinner table, in the car, communicating, talking to our children every day about things which are important to them, sort of leaving space, showing up, available to just listen. Really, really important. Um, I know this isn't possible every day, but engaging in something together as a family that brings joy, happiness. Some other things that are really, really powerful are engaging in ways of giving back, volunteer activities as a family. That's a really powerful resilience builder as a foundational thing for families. Um, Focusing on what's going well, as we mentioned, and not just the challenges, um, really is helpful in managing through and beyond challenges, and not being afraid to laugh. Those are some of the day-to-days that we can engage in.
I love that. I think laughter is a cure all for everything. Even if you mess up and it was like, okay, I just, I don't know, I've spilt things all over the floor and oh my gosh, today has just been a day, and you lose it. And then you're just like, okay, let's just laugh about it. That was really funny. That was, I feel like laughter really is the best. It's kind of, I'm definitely in my husband and I's relationship. I'm a little bit more of which maybe this is just common in male female relationships. I'm obviously more emotional, more like sometimes, and then he's like, it's fine, it's all good, and then he wants to laugh about it, and it actually helps the situation, because sometimes if I'm like really over the top and like, it's not funny right now, maybe in 10 minutes, give me a minute. But I do think that is so helpful when you're having such a hard day, and even just having, as a family, you have your siblings, you have your parents, you have other people that, maybe they can lighten the mood a little bit when things are feeling so hard in that moment. And so I think laughter is the best.
100% agree.
So when a child is feeling defeated, let's say whether in sports, school, or friendships, what is the best thing in that moment that a parent can say or do to help them through that?
Showing up and listening, not necessarily trying to fix it or change what happened, but just listening to the child's experience.
I love that. So what if you could design or like redesign the foundation of like a child's learning journey, what would that include?
It would really be about helping the child to focus on what they can do, as opposed to just focusing on the challenges. And it would be creating an environment, a foundation that really fosters the child's belief in themselves and their ability to move forward despite the things that are hard.
I love that. I think that, parents, obviously on my podcast, I talk a lot about literacy. That's like one of the things that I really love about education is literacy, because I think literacy is the root to everything. Like if you can read and you can write and you can communicate, like that is the most important piece. And so, our literacy scores are just horrendous in our country right now. And so that's kind of what I've been trying to do, is provide parents with literacy tips and like what I found success in, and the research in literacy and how they can help their children. And then I have literacy resources that they can do and things like that. But the number one thing that I put into all of my resources is kind of what you're talking about, is like a growth mindset, resilience. Like that is the foundation to anything in life that if they're going to find success, right? Like you have to have the right mindset, because learning to read is rewiring your brain, and it's really, really hard, and they're going to have challenges. It's not if, it's when, and so understanding that if you want your child to succeed, they have to have that foundation of resilience, of perseverance, of understanding that it's okay to fail, and looking at those wins that we have throughout the day or the lesson or whatever, and really changing our mindset, I think is the most important foundation when we're looking at how can I help my child succeed academically, in just life in general.
100%. I could not agree more.
So you have a new book that is called Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting, which is coming out next year. Is that correct?
It's actually out. It came out this fall.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Yep.
It already came out. Okay.
Yep. Uh-huh.
So what can parents expect from that book?
Yeah, so it's basically a roadmap for how we can optimize our own sense of well-being within our own unique context. So basically, the book contains a lot of what we've talked about here today. The strategies, the tools, the importance of authentic communication, the ways that we can show up level each day, and just all the other things that come along with building that resilient foundation, optimizing our own sense of well being, keeping in mind that there's no one size fits all. So the process is going to look different for all of us. And this book, Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting, is sort of a roadmap that we can all use in our own way to get to the point where we want to be.
I love that. And I love that you're focusing it on the parent, right? You're not saying this is how you can help the child. It's how can you help yourself so that you can help your child. And so I think that is awesome. And I think this book will help so many people in changing or shifting their mindset so that they have a better mindset so then they can model and help their child. So I think that is so, so awesome. And I will put, just so everyone's listening, I will put the link down below in the show notes so that they can get your book. But other than that, do you have anywhere that they can find you or follow along with you?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you about the book, by the way. So my website is great, www.katelundspeaks.com. And I'm also very much available on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Perfect. Is that just under Kate Lund for the Instagram and
Instagram is Dr._Kate_Lund. And LinkedIn is Kate Lund.
okay, perfect. And then I'll just have you send me those links as well. And I'll just put them down in the show notes so that everyone can just go down and click and follow along, get your book. But I have so enjoyed this conversation today. And I think that it is going to help parents to better their mindset so that they can help their children and to become more resilient just as a family.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate you having me on. And this has been a great conversation. So thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an update. Literacy is the foundation of learning, and every child deserves the tools to succeed. If you're ready to take the next step in your child's education, check out my website at k3homeschoolfoundations.com for resources, curriculum, and support to make literacy simple and effective.